Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Workplace Wanderer, the best podcast I've recorded this week. And I am very excited about today's guest. It's somebody I've actually been going back and forth with via email or through some of their people. Their people contacted my people a little while ago, and we've been going back and forth for a little bit. I'm very excited to talk to this man today. Today's topic is attracting and retaining top talent, which is a topic of discussion that many people are trying to master, and it's a very difficult task to do. So I'm excited to introduce everybody to Richard Triggs.
Blake, fantastic to be here. I know that we're talking on opposite sides of the planet. I'm here in sunny Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And so my business is called Arete Executive. Arete is a Greek word. It means the fulfillment of one's full potential. And when we started our firm 15 years ago, we wanted to really find a word that would articulate what we're all about. So we're what you call an executive headhunting firm, and we are retained by organizations to go out and headhunt very specific senior talent for them, typically mid-level technical leadership roles right through to CEO and board level positions. And as I say, we've been in business for 15 years. My professional background prior to that was working predominantly in the building services industry. And like most people in the recruitment industry, I fell into it. I went back to university to do an MBA in my early 30s. And then I was invited to join a recruitment company, worked for others for 5 or 6 years, and then now have had my own business. And so that's what I do, and I love it. We've been having a really wild time over these 15 years. We started on the 1st of February, which was the height of the global financial crisis. And since that time, yeah, absolutely. As people said to me, Richard, you're crazy, but, you know, fortune favors the brave. And so we've been through mining crisis and mining industry collapses in Australia, and then most recently the pandemic. And now, you know, you turn on the news and there's global conflicts going on everywhere, and it's been a pretty wild ride for 15 years. But suffice to say, we're still here and actually doing very well. So that's a sort of a quick introduction to me professionally.
That's great. You weathered some serious storms over the last 15 years. It's been a bumpy ride globally.
Yeah, look, it has been, and I think that, you know, Australia, through really the fact that we're an island and we're a long way away, have been able to weather some of those storms better than others. So, for example, in the COVID pandemic, you know, it's far easier for us to shut our borders and manage that process. So we were, in comparison with countries in Europe and obviously in the US and so on, you know, we had a very safe ride through that. But at the same time, you know, it was still a major challenge for, you know, organizations to think about, well, how do we reinvent ourselves during COVID? And one of the amazing things for us was that prior to COVID, I would say most of my business was very much centered around, you know, my local area, Southeast Queensland, because if we wanted to recruit, we needed to be able to shake hands and kiss babies and meet people face to face and do all those things. And then, of course, after that initial COVID lockdown, suddenly people were very comfortable to have a team or a Zoom-based relationship, as we are right now. And so our business, our footprint literally exploded overnight. And in fact, we are now working for American companies. We are headhunting Americans in America for jobs in America from Brisbane, Australia. Now, that would have never, ever have happened pre-COVID. So, yeah, as you say, it's been a wild ride, but in many respects, you know, there's been a lot of silver lining in these various challenges.
That's what I was going to say. It sounds like, you know, and I think all of us experience some level of silver lining from some of the bigger pandemics, obviously, or bigger issues worldwide, but the pandemic being one of the more recent ones. While it was devastating on so many fronts and there was a lot of uncertainty, some some good things really came out of it. Even for me, I focus a lot on mental health and
Hmm.
improving mental health within workplaces and understanding the human side and the emotion side of people within organizations and within systems. That wasn't, of course, it was talked about prior, but it's something that really came to the forefront because of COVID. It really shed a light on this aspect of of our humanity and our need to respect the human side of ourselves within the workplace and outside of the workplace. So it was a bit of a silver lining in that people started to respect the idea that we need certain things as human beings. And
Mm.
with a lot of that need is we spend most of our time at work. We should be receiving some of that while at work. So anyway, I love that you've been able to be so resilient through all of these
Yeah.
different adversities.
And a couple of comments to make on what you've just said, which I completely agree with. There've been some substantive and very tangible changes. So, for example, now we have a situation where our workforces, in many instances, might work predominantly from home.
Mhm.
And so, from a mental health perspective, or to talk more broadly about culture, suddenly organizations are having to think about how do we address culture, how do we address employee engagement, employee happiness when we may only see them one day a week,
Yep.
or we may only see them on Zoom and Teams. And I think the other element of it is that COVID for a lot of people was a wake up call to why am I working 50 or 60 hours a week?
Mm.
If suddenly my entire life can be turned upside down through some external threat, then that's going to cause me to reconsider, do I actually want to do this anymore? So a lot of people now are either wanting to work part-time, or older people may have chosen to retire earlier, or people may want less stressful jobs. They're prepared to sacrifice money and stress for emotional happiness. So it is a huge issue that organizations are dealing with. Both the negative consequence, but also in some respects, a positive consequence of employees are feeling more empowered to create the life that they would love, rather than just being obliged to do what their parents did.
There was a fascinating book that I read, and the name of it's slipping me. It may actually have been called The End of Leadership, but it was some along the lines of the idea that now really the employees within the organization have all the power. And there's been a shift in that dynamic where they really have to say, hey, this is what we want. The culture has to be like this, or I'm not going to come work for you. I'm not going to
Mm,
stay here anymore. They've sort of taken back ownership of their own lives and realize that they don't have to be a slave to whatever industry they're in if it's not fulfilling them or it's not giving them what they need on multiple levels. So it's
mm.
really interesting stuff that's happened as a result of this whole pandemic that was sort of coming out, like it was budding prior to the pandemic, when the pandemic just kind of put a big fat spotlight on it.
Yeah, look, I think that some authors or people, write these titles or try and inflame, where a couple of things that I talk about, the great resignation, the war for talent, and so on. And then when I hear somebody say employees have got all the power, well, perhaps it's not quite, the pendulum hasn't quite swung that far.
Mm,
At the end of the day, employers have to make money. If they don't have a business. Therefore, the
right.
people don't have a job. So, but I definitely think uh, employees have greater say than they did previously. A
Yeah.
simple example, prior to COVID, let's say we were hiring a finance role for a manufacturing company, and the candidate might say, "Oh, look, if I could work half a day from home once a fortnight, that would be amazing." Do you think that your client, being the employer, could possibly accommodate that? Boy, that would be excellent. Now they're saying, unless I can work from home 3 days a week, I'm not interested.
Right.
So that is a substantive shift, and I don't think that that will ever return. People just won't go back into the office. They'll probably be more flexible, but the uh, the gate's been open, the horse is bolted on that one.
Yeah.
And so we have clients now who say, look, unless the candidates are prepared to work in our office 5 days a week, we won't hire them. And I just say, well, you've got to appreciate that the pool of talent that you'll be considering will be a lot shallower.
Yeah. Are you finding that organizations are trying to adapt to meet that need and are taking steps to it? And are they frustrated in trying to figure out the balance between coming to work and working from home?
Look, I think smart companies are.
Mhm.
It can be frustrating, but it is, if you, like anything, if you don't adapt, you die. It's been interesting, particularly with younger people. Younger people, in some respects, want to be in the office with older, more mature, longer term employees because they want that mentoring environment.
Wow.
Part of their professional development is, being in the room and being able to talk to, the lady or the guy that's been working there for 20 years and can really help them to solve problems and deal with the challenges that they're facing. So when younger people aren't getting that because they are being forced to work from home, or more often the older person doesn't want to go into the office because they now are enjoying this, new lifestyle. It's having a tremendous impact on loyalty and longevity.
Yeah.
There is a higher level of people leaving roles because younger people aren't getting that mentoring and professional development that they really need and want.
Hmm. So we're seeing the lifespan of people's careers or positions at a certain, let's say at a certain job, we're seeing that reduce?
I don't, well, again, after the sort of COVID, suddenly there was this term, the Great Resignation.
Mhm.
Oh God, all these people, they're resigning, and
For the record,
this
those
is
do drive me nuts too, by the way. All the clickbait
right.
stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it does drive me nuts. Even the end of leadership book, I was saying, I see what you're saying. Like, it's very clickbaity. They add a title to it, and then all of a sudden everybody's grouped into that because you quit your job.
Well, it's not dissimilar to Y2K. There are many people who made a lot of money, talking about Y2K, and when it actually occurred, the impact was almost negligible. Now,
Mhm.
was it almost negligible because people became very Y2K uh, prepared? Or was it just, was there incentives for people to make money by saying, the world is going to end? Similarly, the Great Resignation, and this is certainly true for the US and Australia, average professional tenure in 2000 was 3 to 3.5 years. Average professional tenure in 2023 was 3 to 3.5 years. PwC, which is one of the big, global accounting firms, produced a report, surviving the Great Resignation. Oh, average professional tenure now is 3 to 3.5 years. Well, it's always been there.
Hmm.
So what actually happened, in my opinion, is that during COVID, there were a lot of people who they wanted to resign. However, they felt it was too risky to change jobs. What if I go to this new company and I get sick? What if I go to this new company and they're negatively impacted by COVID? Therefore, this is a safe harbor in a storm. I'm going to hang out here. And when COVID's largely behind us, I'll then move. So essentially, there was this bottleneck. The bottleneck was released. We saw a lot of people who would have moved during that period move quickly, and now we're just back to normal. So, do I think that uh, tenure is less now? Well, I certainly think the days of working for a company for 20 years and getting the gold watch and have changed, but I don't think it's dramatically different. And there's a lot of talk about younger people who being less loyal. But one of the things that I say is, they're looking at how their parents were treated during the GFC and during COVID, and how their parents who might have worked in organizations for 10, 20, 30 years being made redundant at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, why would I be loyal when I see what's happened to my parents? And another big issue in Australia, which I'm not sure, but I imagine is similar in the US. A lot of younger people, when I finished university, it was get a job, buy a house, have a family. Well, they're saying now, I can't buy a house.
Right.
Housing's completely unaffordable. Plus, my parents aren't kicking me out at 21. They're quite happy for my boyfriend or my girlfriend to stay over. So what's my incentive to move out? If I don't think I'm ever going to buy a house, why do I have to stay in this stupid job for 20 years? I can just, if I don't enjoy it anymore, I can just leave and I'll have 10 job offers within a week. So it's a completely different paradigm.
Yeah. Part of the topic for the discussion today was retaining talent. So are there things that organizations can do to retain that younger population?
Well, there definitely are. And I think that one of the things that organizations can do, which is at a very, very simple level, and this sounds so basic, is for a manager, and obviously this starts from the top down. So for a manager to say to their direct report, okay, so Blake, you work for me, and obviously you have a lot of choices. Well, okay, for the sake of this illustration, you work for me, and you could work for anybody. There's a lot of choice out there. So what I want to ask you is, why do you love working for me? What are the 3 reasons you love working for me? And then allow the person to say. And the interesting thing is, people will have all different kinds of reasons. I love the variety. I love the technology. I love the team. I love the vision and values. I love the flexibility. I love the remuneration. I love that I get to work with my favorite client, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So each person's got their own 3 unique things. And then once you understand why they love working for you, as long as what they love is appropriate, continue to give it to them. But obviously, it's a reciprocity. So if I'm going to give you what you love, you have to give me what I love, which is productivity and, being a good team fit, good culture fit, and whatever it might be. But the thing is that for most leaders in organizations, they haven't got a clue. And I know this because I test this regularly. I say to, I work a lot with CEOs and business owners and so on. And I say, okay, so your CFO, for example, why do they love working for you? I don't know. I suppose that they want the money. Okay, so the thing about it is that as a leader, if you want to retain good performance, you have to get a beautiful balance of love and accountability. If you love your team too much, but there's not enough accountability, people become soft. They don't perform. Your business is can't achieve its full potential.
Right.
If there's too much accountability but not enough love, people become brittle. They become either solely focused on achieving their own KPIs, or they leave. So the way to retain top performers is to look at, how do I make sure that I both give them enough love, but also hold them accountable enough, because at the end of the day, people want to be loved. They want to perform. They want to be recognized for their performance. So coming back to that just simple tool, I choose those words very importantly. Why do you love working for me? Because the thing is, if you don't love working for me, then we either have to do something so that you do love working for me, or leave.
Right.
Why would I want to retain somebody in my business who doesn't love working for me?
Yeah. You're doing yourself a favor and them a favor as well. If you don't love being here, why should you stay? I'll write you a good recommendation letter.
That's right. And so what happens in a lot of organizations is they outsource to their HR team either a performance review process or a salary review process or whatever it might be, instead of having that heart connection between leader and subordinate because at the end of the day, as you said earlier, Blake, quite rightly, for most of us, we spend more time at work than we do with our families. So you want it to be a fantastic experience for both parties. Otherwise, why do it?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying, and I think that you've made a lot of really great points. And I'd imagine what you're saying and what you're asking leaders to do actually requires the leader to do some reflection on their own biases as well. Because what I believe that most people do, and this is a very human trait, is that we assume that you have the same preferences and likes that I do. So most leaders try to create an environment based on what they like, or they try to create a relationship based on what they like at work. And they forget that there's two people or a whole team in this, and they have to gauge their opinions and their
That's right.
beliefs and their preferences in that process. And it's really up to a leader to remove, not completely, obviously, like you said, accountability and a framework. Providing them with that framework is very important, but removing some of their ego and their preferences of what they might like, and actually creating an environment that's more welcoming to the people that are on their team, as opposed
That's
to what
right.
they would like. So,
Yeah, I agree completely. I am also a trained psychotherapist, although I don't work in psychotherapy, but I find it very useful skill
oh wow.
in the work that I do. I've just finished writing a book called Winning the War for Talent: How to Attract and Retain Top Performers. And one of the things I talk about is that when somebody is born, uh, typically within their first 7 years of life, they are looking predominantly at their parents or other significant role models to try and understand, how does this world work? How does life work? And so they are looking, and they're taking on uh, often the belief structure of their parents, and then those beliefs become reinforced until they become patterns. And so a person in their 40s, or in my case in their 50s, you know, often the way that I perceive life and the way that I react to certain things in my life is because of patterns that, I subconsciously took on, when I was a very early child. Now,
Mhm.
everybody's experience is completely unique. And so, interestingly, as a leader, you have to understand that, number one, as you said quite rightly, Blake, it does require this introspection. This, if I want to understand others first, I must understand myself.
Yes.
Why do I have these preferences, or why do I have these patterns of behavior that either serve or don't serve me?
Mm.
And then it's looking at, without being a psychoanalyst for your staff, because of course we can't do that,
Sure.
but it is understanding that they have their own unique patterns, their own unique perspectives, which in many instances could be completely different to mine. And if I don't take the time to understand what do they want, how can I give them what they want? Because I want them to give me what I want.
Mhm.
So that is true leadership. Now, they're things that you go and do an MBA, you don't learn. And if
Right.
you're in a typical workplace, you're learning how to manage from those that have managed you. And often those people don't know how to manage either.
Yeah.
So it's not that to say that, most managers fail, because most managers obviously succeed to a degree, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have a job, their business wouldn't succeed. But are they achieving their highest potential?
Mm.
If an organization can not only attract but retain the top performers, that is such a massive competitive advantage.
Oh yeah.
uh, and it just creates an environment where everybody can thrive, and leaders can do more of what they'd love to do, work more strategically, have more work-life balance, because they're being able to trust their teams to be accountable and deliver optimal results without being constantly pulled back into having to put out fires and deal with the sort of day-to-day operational stuff.
Very well said. This all makes a ton of sense, and I mean, I love everything that you've touched on. I think it's it's a really important piece for leaders to listen up and to start recognizing and training their managers as well. If you're higher up or wherever you are, getting trained on understanding or developing empathy really is what I'm hearing is the
Yeah,
development of empathy, and then being willing to understand ourselves to understand others. But even giving people what they want, use something that you mentioned, also comes down to having some intentional conversations, I'd imagine, with those people, not just about
exactly.
what they want, the three things, what are the three things you love about working here, but also maybe asking about communication styles and work styles, right?
Yeah, I think that often people hear a word like empathy and they confuse it being empathetic with being soft.
Yeah.
People don't want soft leaders. They want empathetic leaders. They want people who care about them, but they also want people who will hold them to account. Uh, and so um, it is important to have this communication. It is important to have this communication at a one-on-one level. And even if you're the warehouse manager managing a team of forklift drivers, every single one of those forklift drivers also has their unique life, their unique
Hmm.
loves, their unique challenges, etc. So, as you say, this is not just a CEO um, to executive leadership team. This is right through the organization. Now,
Everybody.
obviously, we're talking, you look at an organization that might employ 10,000 people, trying to indoctrinate this culture into the business. It's not easy. Whilst what I'm talking about is simple, it's not easy to do.
Yes.
And so, we're talking about perhaps a nirvana situation,
Right.
but it definitely can be done better than it currently is being done in the majority of businesses.
I would argue that creating this type of environment is as hard as it is with an organization with 5 people to there's 10,000 people. No matter how many people there are, it's tough work to become more empathetic and to remove our own biases and to see through someone else's eyes. And it's tough work. Obviously, it gets harder the more people you add to it. But it's really tough work and takes some serious effort. I think that's where this whole emotional intelligence movement is really smart for workplaces to help people embrace and understand their emotional intelligence and improve it. I hate the term soft skills for the very reason
Mm-hmm.
that you said it. People associate that term soft with being soft, which is why I've always called it human skills or just basic human engagement skills.
Mm-hmm.
But I was smiling when you were talking about empathy and soft because I give a presentation called Empathy Unleashed, and it's talking about empathy in the workplace. And one of my first slides, I have to open up and just address it right off the bat and go, I know what you're thinking. This isn't about being soft and giving everybody hugs and loving. Like, this empathy does actually require some serious accountability and a
Mm.
framework. And empathy is really just a lens that you see the organization or your team through, but it doesn't mean that you do someone's work for them or you pat on them on the back for everything. And you're giving out hugs and kisses left and right. It's a framework that we use, and it's just about being more understanding of each other's needs at work, and so that we can better collaborate and work together. The goal isn't to create a beautiful room of relationships and love, which is good. The goal is to create more collaboration and productivity. It's a workplace in the end.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
want to I want to move over to the idea of attracting talent. Um, so one thing I'd imagine is that obviously, if you want to attract and retain good talent, there has to be some consistency in how you've attracted them. You've lured them in. There's got to be some consistency in what was represented to them. Is that I would imagine that's a big part in retaining people as they come in as well, right?
Absolutely. I think obviously uh, there are organizations who are attracting and they're also retaining their incumbent teams. So it's not about having a strategy for only people that you are now attracting. It's bringing in
Mm.
an overarching, strategy which encompasses both. But if you look at it, uh, again, in my book, I have a framework to take people through, which really begins with how are you building your brand as an employer of choice? If we go back to your comment earlier, Blake, about, employees have a lot of choice now and they're being much more demanding about their workplaces and so on, then what are you doing as an organization to really demonstrate that you're the kind of workplace that people would want to come to? And if you look at the vast majority of companies' websites, they might be beautifully articulated in terms of the goods and services that they're offering to their customers. But there's very little attention, if any, on, why are they an excellent workplace? And so if companies say our people are our greatest asset, then start to, live that through your website, through your LinkedIn profiles. If you're leaders in the business, people want to come and work for somebody that they believe will mentor them and develop them and help them to achieve their full potential. So if you're a leader, what is your LinkedIn profile doing to actually articulate that? Again, most people's LinkedIn profile is literally just a summary of their career history.
Sure.
And so there's so many things you can do in terms of promoting yourself and your workplace, including appearing on podcasts and writing blogs and speaking at events and getting testimonials and, publishing if you're loud and proud about diversity, then where are you actually saying that, et cetera, et cetera. Then the next thing is when you're going to the market for a role, to actually understand what are you hiring for? What does success look like in the role? What are the key deliverables that that person needs to deliver for you? Most position descriptions are quite generic. We're hiring a sales manager to lead a sales team and make sales, and pretty much that's it, right? But people like to do what they're good at, and you want to hire people who have done it before, they've done it well, and they're motivated to do it again. So the foundation of it is to actually work out, what do we need this person to do? Because if we can bring them in knowing that they have absolute clarity about what they're here to achieve, and that becomes then the foundation for building this relationship of love and accountability, you will be able to firstly attract a much higher quality of talent, and then also make sure that that talent is retained and performs. What's happened a lot in both Australia and the US is that organizations have built internal recruitment teams because they believe that they're saving a lot of money by not using external recruiters, and they're providing them with LinkedIn recruiter licenses and so on. But for example, I was talking to an internal recruiter with one of our clients just yesterday and saying to her, how many roles are you currently recruiting in the business, or do you recruit in the business at any one time? And she said, between 40 and 60. So the quality of the brief is low. The quality of candidate engagement is low. The quality of advertising is low.
Because the quantity's increased? No,
because
sorry
the quantity is massive, and so what are we seeing? One very typical, thing that I speak about regularly. If you were to go to an online job board, Seek is a big one in Australia, but whatever it is in the US, and you were to look at the advertisements that companies are putting up for roles within their own businesses, you'll find that 95% of those advertisements are not particularly well written. There's not a strong motivator for people to go, wow, that looks amazing. It's really a regurgitation of a position description, and there's nobody's name or phone number on the ad for a candidate to ring and ask any questions. Now, when I first started in recruitment, and to this day, we will always have somebody's name and a phone number on an ad, but 95% of the time, when an employer is running an ad, there's no name or phone number. So you think about it, a good candidate reads an ad, they're not actively looking, but they see an ad and they go, that might be kind of interesting. I wouldn't mind knowing some more information prior to deciding whether I'm going to apply. but there's nobody to ring.
Right.
So what do? They don't apply, right?
Yep.
Or alternatively, a candidate will say to me, oh, Richard, I applied for this job at Google. It's been 8 weeks. I've had no acknowledgement of my application. I have no idea as to whether I'm in consideration or not. And of course, there's nobody that I can ring and ask any questions.
Mm-hmm.
So organizations, one, they're missing out on attracting excellent talent. And two, people are being disgruntled, and that's damaging their brand as an employer of choice. So I will say to the internal recruiters, why don't you put your name and phone number on the ad? And they will say, because Richard, either I don't want to, or I don't have time to talk to candidates.
Right.
Okay. So there's been this dumbing down of the recruitment process. There's been this commoditization, so organizations go, oh, it's a war for talent. It's so hard to recruit people nowadays. We're constantly getting underwhelming shortlists delivered to us by our internal recruitment teams. That must mean that there's this external war for talent crisis. It's not true.
Right.
There are companies that are good at recruiting, and there's a lot of companies who are terrible at recruiting. It's similar to the retention situation. Oh, we can't retain our staff. Oh, it's because of the Great Resignation.
Right.
It's not. It's because there are companies that are excellent at retaining their people, and there's a lot of companies who are terrible at it. So I've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent
No,
there, but
I'm loving this.
yeah. So it's like anything. I'm sure the same thing in your work, Blake. That there are just simple things that if you consistently do well, you will get an excellent result. And yet you would be amazed at how often we'll go into an organization that want us to recruit a role, and we'll say, okay, great. So, if you were to sit down in 12 months' time and do this person's performance review and say, Richard, we are so pleased we hired Blake. He's been awesome. He's achieved every goal. We couldn't be more delighted. 10 out of 10. What do you want him to
the review you'd get from a manager about me, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah.
What do you need them to achieve? And they go, I don't know.
Right.
Right. They're about to go and hire somebody into their team, in some instance, to pay that person hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they don't even know what they want that person to do.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
It's almost as if it's become very depersonalized and it's very electronic. The hiring process feels very electronic. I mean, I'm sure you do remember. I think you're a little bit older than me. And I look young, so just don't judge me on that. But
it's that fine head of hair.
Yeah, thanks to a modern medicine. But I remember one of the best characteristics that I was always told, even in school, was if you want a job, you apply and you follow up and you call and you show them that you're persistent and that you care. And that persistence is going to get you the job. And honestly, that got me most of my early jobs.
Sure.
Luckily, I've started my own company the last few times, so I haven't had to look for a job for a while, knock on wood. But I know that as that started going away. And there was nowhere to apply. You're applying on these big websites, you're applying online, there's no one to reach out to. And it felt like you're just another number right from the start.
Yeah.
You didn't feel important.
That's right. My first book is called Uncover the Hidden Job Market, How to Find and Win Your Next Senior Executive Role. And it is exactly about that. At least 80% of the best jobs never get advertised. They never get to a recruiter. They never get to the open job market. They're filled through the hidden job market. What is the hidden job market? An employer identifies somebody who can solve their problems and take away their pain, and they hire them. So if you're limiting, we're kind of talking the other side of the coin now, but if you're limiting your job search to only applying for roles that are advertised, number one, it's a very small percentage of the actual roles. And number two, you're almost guaranteed to have a pretty crappy experience, right? So how do you access those hidden job markets? You have to identify your employer of choice, and you have to get in front of them before they know that they need you. Now, one of the wonderful things about LinkedIn is that it's so easy to do now. So to use, I mentioned Google earlier, so let's stick with Google only because that word is up on the screen on my computer. So let's say you go, okay, look, I'd love to have a marketing role at Google.
Right.
So you can go onto Google's website, you can find who their chief marketing officer is. You can go onto LinkedIn, you can find them on LinkedIn, you can send them a message and you say, hey, I'd love to have a 15-minute Zoom or Teams meeting with you. I'd love to have a chat to you about, my career and get some advice from you about my job search. And perhaps you talk about what you're doing at Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
These line managers, okay, remembering we go back to the other side, it's a war for talent. We can't get good people. Our internal recruitment teams are not delivering us great people or what have you. So if you go to that person and you can get in front of them, and through demonstrating that you can solve their problems and take away their pain through your key achievements and transferable skills, they will hire you, right? But people don't do that. Going back to exactly what you said, the day I turned 15, I went, okay, I'm legally allowed to have a job now. I went down to the local shopping centre. I walked along and I finally went into our version of a big supermarket. It's called Woolworths. And I said, look, I'm 15 today. Can I have a job? They said, fantastic, start tomorrow. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. It's when I'm talking to the job seeker, it's about saying to them, you need to become much more proactive about reaching out directly to your employer of choice, because that is where you create the opportunity, exactly like what you were saying earlier.
So it's getting creative with the same old school techniques of being persistent and reaching out and getting personal contact, but being creative with it. Obviously, you can't just walk into their front door of Google
No.
and say, hey, give me a job, but you find them on LinkedIn. That's interesting.
Well, the thing about it is if you went to Google and said, can you give me a job? They would push you to their internal talent team, and the internal talent team would say, oh, look, just go onto our online job inquiry portal and fill out a form,
Yep.
and you'll probably never hear from us again, because they've got a tactical orientation. They're only interested in filling the roles that they currently have. And if Blake doesn't suit a role that they currently have, then they just don't have any time. Whereas the executive line manager has a strategic orientation. They're thinking, what projects have we got coming up? Who's underperforming and needs to be replaced? Who's retiring and needs to be replaced? What are my human capital needs? And so they have a much greater desire to engage with you, because part of their role is to build a bench of talent, right, for future opportunity. Walking in the front door of Google, well, you don't need to do that anymore. You just find the person on LinkedIn and you send them a message. How awesome is that? And instead of saying, oh, can I come in and meet with you for an hour, which is logistically challenging, you can say, look, can we just jump on Teams for 15 minutes? It's become so easy, right? Anybody who is unemployed or underemployed now, it's because of choice. That's they're choosing that. Because if they want to, I don't know what unemployment is like in the US right now, but in Australia, it's about 4%. 4% basically means everybody who wants a job's got a job, right? It's not necessarily their nirvana job, but here is an opportunity to empower yourself to go out and create the career that you would love. Similarly, as the employer, I would be saying to the employer, if quality people reach out to you and ask for 15 minutes, even if you don't have a vacancy at that time, meet with them. Because that's part of your job.
Yeah. And everybody's got 15 minutes.
For
I don't
sure.
care what they say. Well, this has been a great, very enlightening conversation. I appreciate you've thrown a lot of information at us in a great, very palatable way that makes a ton of sense. I hope somebody who's listening, maybe who is unemployed or is looking for a new job or is a organization looking for good people, can pick up on some of the advice that you've given today. I always love to give people a chance to plug themselves and plug their businesses. So where can people find you?
Okay, well, so obviously my business, Arete Executive, ARETE executive.com.au. We have a little AU on the end because we're in Australia.
Nice.
If you are a job seeker and you would like a free copy of my book, Uncover the Hidden Job Market, you can come to my website and fill in, I think you just put in your email address and we will email you a PDF version of the book. I've given away, I don't know, 20, 30,000 copies of that book. And I am certainly very happy to give that to people because I constantly get feedback every day from people who have applied what they've read, and it's really assisted them in finding a new job. So that's my website. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, and then I have my own podcast, the Arete Podcast, where I interview predominantly business owners and CEOs about their careers and their businesses and so on. Would love to connect with people. Obviously, I make my money through recruiting roles for employers, and certainly if there's anybody listening who would like perhaps some innovative ways to recruit people into your team, I would be very happy to have a chat about that. But Blake, I'm about to turn 56 next month, and I've just learned in life that if I'm happy and helpful, the universe looks after me. So, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and share these thoughts. And likewise, perhaps I can invite you to come onto my podcast and talk more about your perspective on things. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you, do you have any advice for the world? And you gave it there right at the end. And I will also say that if you want a job with Arete Executive, just reach out to him on LinkedIn over and over again, because that was the advice that we got today in today's podcast.
Well,
Everybody,
we're certainly always looking for excellent recruiters to join the team. And in fact, we're currently looking to recruit two, but we are looking to recruit two in Australia. But now that we are starting to work in the US, who's to say that perhaps in 12 months' time, when we next talk, Blake, I might be, forging ahead and creating a fantastic business on your shores.
you never know. You never know. Well, everybody who has been listening, thank you for listening. If you were listening to this podcast, do me a favor and go leave us a 5-star review. If you enjoyed it. If you did not enjoy the podcast, just keep moving. We don't need the negative feedback. I enjoy feedback both ways, but not on the podcast because it doesn't help me at all. If you are watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like, comment below something you've learned from today's episode, and please subscribe to the channel. Everybody, thank you for listening. Richard, thank you so much for joining me today.
An absolute pleasure.